Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I am your host, Christine Courtney, and we have back in the studio today one of the favorites, one of our top 10 tips from last year from our first 100 episodes. Tom Armstrong is back in the house. Hey,
Hello,
Tom.
hello. Hey, Christine.
Actually, not that I want to get your ego up even more after that, but I have gotten two emails to me specifically about your last episode from complete strangers who said, "Hey, I really
Really?
like the podcast, but specifically, I liked the one with Tom Armstrong talking about managing folks and stuff." So I thought that was really cool
Oh, that's nice.
for you. Tom Armstrong is Senior Director of Programming at the Leadership Program. As I've said before, we've worked together for dozens of years
20 years.
and 20 years. And he
Something like that.
manages many, many people over the years, probably hundreds. And he does a fantastic job. And I wanted to dig in on this thing because it's something that he and I have talked about for years now. And that is meetings and how meetings are out of control in all companies right now. And I would say, for the most, I have my own reasons as to why I think that happened, but it's probably one of the biggest complaints I get from folks is that they're in meetings that they don't know why. They feel like it's a waste of time. They're constantly in meetings. They have no time to do work because they're always meeting. They have meetings before meetings, meetings after meetings, side meetings, quick meetings that take longer than you think. So I want to start this series, and this is not something that we can handle in 30 minutes, but I want to get this topic started because I'm on a crusade for the next year to try to see, can we really positively affect how humans meet these days? So, and it doesn't matter if you're listening, if you're working remotely, if you're working hybrid, if you're working in person, we're going to address all of it somehow in this quest to make meetings a more valuable point of time and where ideas can flow and where things can actually happen. So I can't think of a more perfect person to bring to this than Tom, because he has talked about this in our company for years now and has tried a lot of things and is open to trying things. So here we go. Okay, Tom, let's be honest. Why do so many meetings feel like a waste of time?
Okay, so I'll go from personal experience, I guess. I'll just go through my list of things. I've definitely been in meetings where one of the common, not in our organization, of course, no, but one of the common complaints
You're
I would
about to
have
make
is that
people really unhappy that
someone,
you work with.
I know, is someone's derailing the meeting.
Mm.
And there isn't a sense of who's in charge. You can sometimes, having a collaborative atmosphere is a great idea in the right context. It's not always a great idea. So you could be overly collaborative to the fact that there isn't one clear leader of the meeting who's steering the thing in a direction, and therefore someone kind of goes off on a different direction and no one sort of steers it back or says, okay, we'll talk about that later. And so you're just sitting there going, this has nothing to do with me anymore. Like, even the agenda was clear. I understand why I'm here, but this guy over here is just talking about a story that has nothing to do with this and no one's stopping this. Like, come on. So you can even have a great agenda and it just gets derailed because there's no leader being decisive in the moment to steer the things towards the result that we're there for. Often you'll hear the complaint after a meeting, everybody kind of, away from whoever was leading it, says, that could have been an email. That's a common sort of side comment you'll hear people say. Meetings that basically could have been a different means of communication, totally did not have to bring everybody together to get the outcome, or the outcome wasn't clear. We walk away going, okay, I don't know what I need to do differently now than I was doing when I came into the meeting, or that anybody needs to do differently. It was just some information sharing. Another pet peeve is folks are showing up late and the leader's going, well, we want to wait till everybody's here. And you're just sitting there for 10 minutes and you showed up on time or even early, and your time isn't being respected because one person's showing up late. But the big one for me, honestly, is when I have a meeting, I try, maybe I have a day packed full of like meetings and conversations. And so I have one budding right up. Maybe there's a 5-minute gap between when this is supposed to end and the next one. And now you've gone over by a half hour. So I'm in your meeting, texting my next meeting saying, I am so sorry, I'm going to be late. And that's embarrassing for me, for my next person now that I'm have to be late for to see inconvenient for
Mm-hmm.
them. So there's a myriad of things that go wrong in meetings. We could have a whole podcast just about that.
We could.
But those are some of the top ones
And we
for me.
just might have that. But what do you think the biggest mistake? And I know there's a lot of them, but let's just name a couple. What's the biggest mistake leaders make when they walk into the meeting?
Well, I mean, I don't know the data on this specifically. Walking into a meeting and jumping right in without having any kind of check in. I think it's good to have some sort of check in to bring everybody together and unify people in a meeting. Not a 20-minute out of your 30-minute meeting, but 5 minutes. You
Mm.
check in with people, unify, and then and then have your meeting. As long as that's also part of the agenda,
Yeah.
because everybody's going to be scattered, and wherever they were a second ago, that's where they still are. So you try to get everybody into the meeting together by doing some sort of check-in, I think is key.
You know what you just made me think of, which I think I can relate to for myself, is that it is also about taking that little bit of emotional check in with myself if I'm the leader of the meeting before I walk into that
Yeah.
room. Because like
Hmm.
you said, we are stacked up meeting to meeting to meeting. So oftentimes I have been fallen victim to this is that I will bring the energy from or my frustration or whatever from my last meeting into this new meeting and it doesn't necessarily serve it.
Absolutely. And I love that you share that, Christine, also because I think this is true for me for all the topics that we discuss. I don't get all of them just because I feel like I know these things. I don't nail them every time. I get
Right.
better, hopefully, every year than the previous year. But I make all kinds of mistakes with meetings, like what you're describing, because we're human beings. But I know better. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I always do better, I guess.
I
But
know, but
yeah,
I
that's
think that
one of
is
them.
true. Like how important energy is, and whether it's energy that you bring in, whether it's the energy, like you said, that you start, whether you do a check in to help other people's energy get all focused on the same thing. And I think that is key.
Yeah.
I
There's
know
a
that
there's
you
a
go to a
bunch of
lot of,
things that could.
yeah. And you go to a lot of meetings that are outside too. So you see a lot of meetings with lots of different clients and vendors and so forth. And have you ever walked out of a meeting and thought, oh my God, what just happened there? Like, what causes that when you just are like, either this was a waste of time? I mean, that's, I think, probably the worst. At least if you're angry about something, it means something happened. But if you're angry just about it being a waste of your time, like that just didn't serve anyone. If you think about how much money per hour is in that room, like it's such a waste of
That
dollars,
frustrates me
you
what
know?
you're saying. It's such a waste of actual money, even if you don't take people's thoughts or emotions into consideration or their opinions on the matter. It does cost money to have meetings. So a common experience that I have with clients or folks outside of our company, because we don't do this much because we really think about this ahead of time, I find. But I'm not saying, like I said before, we're not perfect, but a common one is you kind of get a sense that these meetings, that someone decided that we have to have meetings every month or something like that. So
Mm,
then the person who's in charge of scheduling the meeting knows they have 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever every month that they need to call all these people together and have a meeting for. And then they build their agenda around the fact that they have that time to fill and that period of time when they need to do it. And so the content is frequently the second most important thing to them. The first most important thing is that they're complying with the meeting that needs to happen at that frequency and at that time. And then they fill it with information or whatever. And the opposite should be true. Meetings should be a last resort. Have I thought of all the other ways what do I need to communicate? Have I thought of all the means by which I could communicate that? Or maybe it's not communication. I need to get information. But have I done my due diligence to get it in other mediums before I do the meeting? Meeting should be the last resort.
interesting. Interesting. That is controversial. I think, and interesting because you're right. We don't think of it that way. Like, have we done everything? I think there's some exceptions to that because I guess if you're gaining information, but sometimes you need the energy of the group to have a brainstorm about new ideas or something like that that would be
Yeah.
difficult to do one on one. But I do think that you're right. It's like that's a very specific meeting.
And that's an example of my last resort for that kind of
Yeah.
meeting because I can't do it in the other mediums. Therefore, I need to sometimes I'll have meetings once a week with my team. It's sometimes it's only 5 minutes, sometimes it's a half hour. We cap it at 30 minutes, but it's a little more free. Like we ask people to share problems that they're having. People share, and that one there's more flex. The agenda is clear. We do like a quick admin updates, but then it's like if someone has a problem to share, they share it. We all kind of help to offer advice on it. And if I were to do that in an email, I wouldn't get the kind of collaborative process that talking with other people and seeing them provides. Now we do it online because I find that'll get you in 85% of the same effect as having everybody in person for that kind of meeting. It's fine when we do it online. And then people aren't also traveling to the location to have the meeting. But that one, it's for me, it's so important to have that type of energy that you're describing. So I have a specific time and we do it then. And if it's not happening, we end it after 10 minutes. If it's really action packed, we just max out at 30. But that can't happen in an email or a phone call. So we do it that way.
I love that idea. I think problem sharing is interesting because I think immediately garners people interest if they really feel vulnerable enough to share real problems. But also you're getting learning just from hearing like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. Let me listen and see if I can not only help that person, but learn if I too am having that trouble. But I think that's because you have a high trust environment. Like a lot of places don't have that kind of trust to be able to share real problems. So they share problems, but they
Yep.
end up being fake brags, you know? It's all
Yeah.
it's all
True.
like things they fixed, someone else's problem that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
fixed. So let's go opposite,
Sure.
but maybe step it up a bit. When you think about a great meeting, okay, some of the great meetings you've ever been a part of, what's something that's actually different about it? And not just the opposite of what we just said, but what's different about a great meeting, you think?
I love it. But this is maybe a little bit
Go
specific.
ahead.
Everybody's a little different. Everybody's answer to this would be different. But for me specifically, I just love a short, effective meeting where I walk away going, oh, I have clarity. I connected with folks like as well. Like I got to see them and talk, but I walk away knowing what I need to do from that meeting or what the team needs to do differently. And it was brief. Like it took me 15 minutes. Incredible. So I do love a tightly, well driven, well led meeting. It's beautiful. I also love a meeting where the leader of the meeting is vulnerable enough to hear honest opinions, which I think is what you're describing without getting defensive is the key to building that trust in meetings. If you come out right away and say, in this meeting, I'm going to be sharing this stuff. If I want to let everybody know, if you do disagree with me, it doesn't hurt my feelings. Tell me, because that's what keeps the meeting vital and alive is actually, and I might I might not know the answers, but the worst case scenario is that everybody's sitting back, not letting me know the fact that they think there's something wrong here.
Hmm.
So you have to, and then you have to follow up with not being defensive. If someone does challenge, you don't just go into explainers for why it's the way it is, but you really listen and, maybe set up a different meeting to address the thing or address it in a moment. But you drive the thing forward and you allow for some dissent or challenge without getting flustered. It's super hard. It's so you just want to defend, but you know to
Yeah, it's
really
probably
accept
one of the number
feedback during
one
a meeting.
ways. Excuse me, but it is probably one of the number one ways what you just described to building psychological safety. Like people are always like, how do I create a more psychologically safe team? Meaning that the team feels that they could take risks without being insecure or embarrassed, that they can speak truth to power, that there's a possibility of debate, and that best teams are able to do that. And I do think that when someone challenges you in a meeting, it is the hardest time to be vulnerable because you're in front of everybody. So it's scary, right? But I do think that it's very
Yeah,
interesting in terms of like, boy, is it powerful. It sends a very powerful message to folks. Let's talk about agendas real quick because there's a lot of debate now on
yeah,
agendas, right? Everybody says you have to send an agenda, but then people today's day and age, they don't like, they kind of are against the old fashioned agendas that are sent a week or a month ahead of time, with to the minute breakdowns of what we're going to do. I've seen people do very effective agendas that are a text message or a Slack message. But what do you think? What's important to you about an agenda?
Yeah, I guess that there is one, the
Good one.
if I'm going to get together last minute with somebody, if you and I were to say, "Hey, let's have a meeting right now because we have to talk about something," the first thing I would do is say, "Let's draft." If as soon as we sit down, let's draft a quick agenda about the topics we're going to cover.
In the meeting.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah. At
interesting.
the very beginning of
Yeah.
the meeting, if I don't have an agenda, what are the points we need to cover? And then we write them down, and then that's our agenda. Otherwise, you start
Good
out
tip.
talking about umbrellas, and then you just talk about umbrellas, and then later on, you're like, "Oh, I forgot I had to talk about this other stuff. It got derailed by this other urgent thing." But when you don't talk about any content except for the big picture, what are all the things we need to talk about? That also helps you understand, well, can we even do this meeting in the 15 minutes that we have? Maybe this 15 minutes we need to be looking at our calendars and finding enough time to cover these topics.
Yeah, that's a
Or
great
then, but
tip.
then you dive into it and when you're done, you did it. Yeah. People skip
Yeah,
the
and
agenda
hopefully
all the
that's
time
not
for
the
those they don't
norm.
think they need it.
Yeah, hopefully that's not the norm. Hopefully they have agenda beforehand, but I love that if you just have an impromptu meeting, you create a quick agenda together right there. I think that's a wonderful tip. I think it's also really important, less than like the timing of the agenda. I think it's very important for the facilitator to have it to time out how long one thinks it's going to take for yourself as the facilitator to make sure you don't have too many items
Yeah.
on that agenda. However, and I always have a little extra, and I also always know where I can cut if we don't have enough time, right? It's just like you're like, do if I have time and things go faster than I want, and I have taken the time to get everybody together, and Lord knows it's hard to get everyone together. Do I have something that's of value that I can add in? Or what am I going to cut if I see that more often than not we start going over in things? I do think, though, that more important than the timing for everybody else is exactly that. This is why we're getting together. This is the purpose of this meeting. Is it a brainstorm? Is it informational and I want you to be able to ask questions to my face and in front of each other? Is it that we need to work out a problem? We need to problem solve something together. Some sort of purpose so that people come into that meeting going, I am needed, attention is needed here, and I'm going to be focused on this bigger outcome. I think that sets an expectation and lets people know that they're there. But otherwise, especially online, they're doing other work. It's so annoying. They're doing other work. Now,
Yeah.
I think you and I may disagree
Yeah.
about this, so feel free. But one of the things that also bothers me is people having cameras off during meetings that are remote. Does that bother you too? Or are you like, no, it's easier for people to focus? I mean, I don't, whatever your real answer is, I'm interested in. But in the beginning, in the beginning times, when COVID started, we were much more forgiving of people based on whatever their home situation was to say, like, oh, you have your kids home or you're, having to work, lots of people working in the same space. We were very forgiving of people turning their cameras off. And then I felt like it just became an easy out to be able to, uh, and people were doing other things and didn't feel like wanting to put, look decent or had their jammies on still or whatever. But it drives me crazy now. Like I don't want to be in a meeting with you if you have your camera off. Unless you have a really good reason. You say this is why, guys, or sometimes you have a kid home or whatever. But any thoughts on that for you?
Yeah, I do. I think, it's not a pet peeve of mine necessarily or something like that, but I do think that cameras should be on. The problem with cameras off is that the temptation is just too great to not be present. You're already
Yeah.
detaching, and there's no, it's being in person. There's a quality to it that is lost. There's some quality lost for a meeting when it's all everybody on Zoom or Teams or whatever the online platform is that where you're having your online meeting. And so there's already some diminished quality to the meeting as a result. But if I then degrade it more by having everybody has their cameras off, and if one person has their camera off, certainly if half the people have their cameras off, then I feel weird having my camera on a little bit. Like, well, I guess everybody else is doing it. I'll turn mine off and then I'll go get my coffee and do as I
Mhm.
wish. And I think some decorum is important at meetings. If it's too casual, you do get more of that quality of the
Mhm.
meeting loss. And so a serious meeting, in my opinion, cameras are on with some exception, except people can blur their backgrounds. There's so much people can do to disguise the fact that there's something happening. You could like you just have a wall behind you. It's I'm not a parent, so I don't know the challenges specifically. I haven't experienced the challenges that a parent has with toddlers running around. So, it'd be a lot for me to say that. So with some grace offered to people, but generally speaking, cameras should be on, I think, for sure.
I think it's interesting, there was a Harvard Business Review came out with an article about a year and a half ago on the new form of executive presence. And one of the things that was different in these post COVID times in terms of the way people look at executive presence was this idea of showing up, like being there, physically being there. And I think if you can physically be somewhere, do it. If everybody works remotely, the way that we show up is cameras on. So forget about thinking like I'm doing this, think of it as so many people say, how can I have more executive presence working remotely? Have a professional appearance. And professional today also is something different. It means authentic, but you want to, you look like you're dressed for work, not like you're still working all day in your pajamas, but unless you're a pajama company, I guess, but like you're actually showing up and you're engaged online. All right, let's talk about. I want to have time to get to this before we end today. So I'm going to jump to this idea of engagement and participation. So we all know these meetings that end up with the same two or three people talking. What are some simple ways leaders can get everyone engaged? So not just the loudest voices.
You taught me this one. God, must have been 15 years ago, Christine, and I love it. If you have a question, you need some feedback from people, some kind of brainstorming session, and you don't want to just have the extroverts in the room or the guy, whoever feels the most that is always raising their hand and talking, aka me.
Or
You
me.
you hand out an index card to everybody, and you have
Oh,
them
yeah.
write down their top, three reflections or their three thoughts on it, and then after they write it down, they then share like one after another, so you can get that information. But it's not because brainstorming. The weakness of brainstorming is whatever someone's talking about will then become the will set the path for all the
Mhm.
future conversation about the thing. And so you're letting go of all the conversations about everything else over here. But by hearing the things people wrote down, and the reason you'd have rewrite down three is if someone else said it, they can always do their number two. So you are getting more information. And then people discuss what was shared, from the cards. And then you do hear at least everybody's point of view. Another is to say at the beginning of meetings. I do think it's important to frame it to say, a couple things. You might have a ton of great ideas. I'm going to also lean into hearing more voices. So sometimes if you've said one or two things in the meeting, I might end up saying, okay, I'm going to hold off for a moment and call on someone, or I'm going to actually ask someone else to speak. So that might happen during the meeting. I might just call on you. I know Erica would do she'd write everybody's name on a what is that called? Popsicle stick. And then she'd pull it out and just randomly, you could put a piece of paper, pull it out and do random call outs for people to get their input. Some people are terrified to speak publicly, others are not. So just creating as much of a safe space for, quote unquote, as you can. But yeah, I think one of the key ones is the one with the cards is something I would immediately say you could try.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I think also this is something that I learned from reading that book, Quiet, that really like how to get introverts more engaged in meetings or how to hear their voices more. And one of those things I thought was interesting was, I value improvisation so much because I'm pretty good at it. So I didn't realize that not everybody likes to have questions just thrown at you in a meeting because that doesn't
Yeah.
bother me. So when I read that and I thought, oh, if you want to get those introverted minds, they tend to be very good observers. If you want to get their thoughts, and course I did. Ask those questions ahead of time in your agenda. Like, these are the questions we're going to be looking at, so that their mind has time to feel more comfortable doing a little bit of research beforehand or prepping for that meeting. And that was like a aha moment for me, because I thought it would take out the like spark of a meeting or the fun, but actually it just made it go a little deeper, because because believe me, the people like myself that want to just be off the cuff, we're not reading those questions ahead of time anyway. Do you know what I mean? But the people the people that do, they're going to actually prepare and be more comfortable sharing their more, researched thoughts, or get some data behind it. And I think that can be important as a leader. I think for those of you out there that are in meetings and you're wondering, how do I participate more, or how do I step back and not take over a meeting? I think is a really good self reflection. I know for myself, and I have coached this on other people. If you tend to talk a lot, I'll say, you can only talk 3 times in this meeting. I'll say this to myself. So I'm going to try to hold on to one of those times to be important, not just have to just jump on because I'm excited about adding on to something that someone says. And then I'll counter to that is, if you're someone who's very shy, I've said to them, you must talk at least once. And that tends to get them to go early on, because they don't know if they're going to have an idea later. You can talk more, but you must talk once in this meeting. And people are afraid that they're going to become the over talker, but generally that's not the case. Any other
That's
thoughts
good.
on those
Yeah,
things for those folks?
one thing I love about that is that you're giving this pre expectation about the meeting. You're kind of like saying, this is how we're going to do the meeting. And so you're setting it up in advance, and also like giving that feedback ahead of time. And also knowing that for people who, again, like, we said it earlier, but I do like to be the guy, like, I have ideas come to my head and I love to share them. Okay. So I love the idea of prepping the meeting ahead of time, prepping folks ahead of time about the expectation about how we share that, stepping forward, that phrase stepping forward or stepping back. If you've already stepped forward, step back a bit, let others talk. People do tend to then go, oh, we're doing that collectively. I will also do that. It helps. I think that it's not just an introvert extrovert thing necessarily either.
Mm.
You can be an introvert and love to contribute, have ideas, love to contribute them to meetings. But I don't know, it's weird, Christine. I just had like a crash or something. Really, I hit a wall with that one. I need to start over with it or
We'll
something.
cut that
I
if it
have
comes
ideas
back
about
to
it, but I'm getting into my own.
you're
I'm
getting
tripping
into your
out on it
own.
because it
You're
involves me
thinking
so
about
much.
yourself too much.
I'm talking about
All
myself
right.
too much, and then
All right. Real quick, we're going to jump to some rapid fire things before we close. Best meeting you've ever been in, one thing that made it great. You don't have to
again,
say the meeting.
brief and
Okay.
clear and brief.
One word to describe most meetings today.
Most meetings, non-essential.
One word, describe what they should feel like.
One word.
Essential.
Meaning essential.
And what's one thing about meetings you wish every leader would rethink?
I really love this. So I wish every leader who's leading a meeting felt the need to be a decision maker during the meeting and to drive it forward, and to rely on sometimes a little less. I mean, unless you're just, you have to gauge where you are on the spectrum here, but we can lean so far into the collaborative meeting again that it becomes diffuse and we're not sure where this thing is even going anymore. In a crisis is on the one level of it, right? But during a crisis, you need a leader who's going to like pull everybody together and say,
Yeah.
this is what needs to get done. This is neat. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. This is when it needs to be done by, so this thing can be resolved as quickly as possible. People love that kind of leadership. At that moment, they don't want collaboration. There are times when really softer, shared leadership is important in a meeting. And so do it then. But you have to know the context for it. And I would say most of the time, meetings need a decisive leader that can drive things forward so that people know who does what by when at the end of the meeting. And the thing ends either when you said it was going to end or a little early because you were driving the thing. You weren't allowing people to, you're using kindness though, right? You're being kind to people and you're taking care of people, but you are saying like, okay, we're actually going to have a separate meeting. That's a great point you're saying. We'll talk about that in a minute, or we'll talk about that after the meeting. I want to make sure we end on time. you're not humiliating that person unless you are really shaming or doing it, dominating. But drive things forward, be kind, but get it done so that people and be accountable.
I love that. And Brene
That's it.
Brown says clarity is kindness. So we can all
Clarity
be
is
a little,
truly kindness.
it truly is kindness. One last tip. We've said it before, but I'll say it again. A wonderful thing to do is as you do a check in at the beginning of meetings, that's very quick. I like a quick check in at the end where you just go around and say one commitment that you are going to make as a result of this meeting. So that proves that it was worth it for you to be there. And secondly, something you're going to cascade to somebody else that wasn't in that meeting. I think those are two things, commitments and cascades. But Tom, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your
That's fun. Thanks,
clarity. I
Christine.
learned some things I know that I'm going to think about before I go into my next meeting. And those of you at home or in your car or on a walk listening, I hope you found some things. And we are going to continue this conversation because we really just started with the beginning and with the end, and we didn't talk about the whole middle. And so that is going to come up in future episodes. So tune in. We are on a quest to transform meetings and make sure they hit the mark. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending time here on Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you want to get anything more out of this, go to our YouTube channel and please subscribe to Leadership Lab TV. If you heard something today, of course, that resonated with you, do something with it. It's all about the choices that you make. It's what you say in conversations, how you show up in a moment. Share this episode with someone who's maybe starting a new job or stepping into a new level of leadership, and try one idea because it just might create some pretty powerful leadership ripple effects. Until next time, keep stepping in because the room changes when you do.